Hey guys, this is Titan and welcome to the 27th episode of Vedastein. Now on the schedule for today is the Baroque Garden of the town, which I just started with this main axis of the garden connecting the city palace of Vedastein with the former, or which I say are the former royal stables of Vedastein, which you see here. Now, you already see on the length of this episode that this is going to be something big. And based on the area, it actually isn't even that big. But Baroque gardens are something really complex, and so doing it in a smaller episode just wasn't possible. And I actually did a poll on both YouTube and Twitter asking you guys, is it okay to have an episode that long, or should I cut even more out? And the vast majority was like, yes, go for it, do it. So here I am with a 40-minute video, the longest video I ever did, at least on this channel. Now, Baroque gardens are something unique by itself. Baroque gardens aren't unique in the sense that there are only few of them, but they are unique in their sort of design and unique in their idea, in the idea they transfer. Baroque gardens were built in a time when kings and queens and the nobility still ruled everyone and everywhere. And they felt like they actually rule the universe and also rule above nature, which doesn't make sense because even today humanity doesn't rule above nature. But back in the days they really felt like that, which I guess we still do. But anyways, in that sense they also wanted to force nature into geometrical shapes. And for that they built Baroque gardens. Of course also to enjoy the gardens because they are really beautiful, and also just to have a nice stroll there to show their wealth, of course, but it also always was the point of showing their power even above nature. And in that sense, Baroque gardens of course consists of nature, but cut and forced into geometrical shapes everywhere. And that is flower beds with geometrical ornaments, that is trees shaped like boxes, that is many hedges, and that is straight paths going into the countryside or whatever. And that is Baroque gardens. And so I started this one here with, of course, a long and very straight main axis. As I already explained, connecting the main palace or the city palace of Vedastein with the, as I call it, former royal stables of Vedastein. And here now I'm starting the, I suppose the most important point of this and probably every Baroque garden, which is the so-called parterre. And that is the ornate flower beds or the ornate lawn ornaments at the center of each Baroque garden, right next to the palace. Of course, I'm not only I'm not a proper garden designer, so I can't come up with a unique design just from the top of my head. So for this design I copied, or not really copied, but I let myself be inspired from the Baroque garden in Salzburg, the Mirabell Garden, which belongs to the Mirabell Palace, and that one fit the amount of space we have here in Vedastein pretty well, and so I basically copied that size and ornaments. And you already saw, or you still see it, these small traffic cones and the curbs. Those are here to help me get the right shape, because Baroque gardens aren't something sloppy you just throw in there and something here and something there and it magically fits. Baroque gardens are, as I already said, geometric shapes, and in that sense you really have to take care of the right proportions and of the right angles everywhere. And so I used traffic cones that I placed with the prop line tool in the right, remoteness from each other, in the right spot, so to say, that I measured in Google Earth based on the real measurements in this Baroque garden from Salzburg I just mentioned. And that way I got the right proportions of and this Baroque garden here. And after that I just placed the curbs connecting these traffic cones to just help me have everything on a straight line. Now this Baroque garden here consists of these few parterres, and I started doing those after I did the measurements by just placing Ronix's grass surface props, because those sort of are the basis for these flower beds, and of course those just based on the geometrical shapes we have now just look nice by themselves. I think you already get the point. It's hard to explain for me how these Baroque gardens work, because they are such a complex thing by themselves, and it might be hard to understand the sense of them, I think. But I'm hoping with this video I not only can show you this pretty nice thing I did in Cities Skylines, but also sort of help you a bit why these gardens exist and why they look how they look. So I already made the basis of these ornaments here, these lawn ornaments that will also include the flower beds later. And here I'm just having some hedges on the edges of these grass ornaments. Those don't really have a sense or a point by themselves. They just add more. I suppose they add more three-dimensionality. Is that a word? I hope so. They add more 3D to this. To these ornaments by having something actually stick out, and just by that making it look more interesting. Now having those hedges on the edges isn't really a must-have in Baroque gardens. Some have it, some don't. I think it's more of a northern German thing to have these hedges, and as this city is in historic North Germany, so Saxony would be historic North Germany because it's Protestant, I also use these hedges here, and also because they just look more interesting than the bare grass surfaces. Another thing you already saw me using quite a lot is the mirror functionality in Move It. Here I'm using it again, see, I clicked and it mirrored it. And that is a functionality that is really helpful in that sense here, because Baroque gardens also play a lot with symmetrical things. But before I continue talking about that, now we start actually placing the flower beds, or more like the flowers. And those flowers are not just sprawling all over the place, or just growing wherever they want to grow. Those flowers usually are bred, I suppose, in special greenhouses, and once they bloom, they are placed onto the they are placed on the flower beds, so that whenever you are in a Baroque gardens or whenever you are in a Baroque garden, be it spring or summer, the flowers will always bloom, and that is because they are they come from a special greenhouse that sort of brings them to bloom, I suppose, and then places them here. And you already see those are already made in geometrical shapes. And also those are placed in a symmetrical way. I think you already saw that I also here mirrored it alongside the main axis. And here again I'm talking about the main axis of this garden. So you see that it really is the main axis is, or the central axis is probably the better term for it. Prop line tool here is a huge help, of course, because plopping all these flowers by hand, not gonna happen. That would have been so annoying. And then again, I think that whole garden would not have been possible in the same way without, of course not without Move It, nothing would be possible without Move It, but without the mirror tool that Cuboid made for Move It. Because you need to have it all symmetrical alongside the main axis, and doing that by hand is, I think it's not possible at all. And here's another neat feature I used, and that is that I'm not sure how it's called. That is that randomize angle feature, that just when you select a couple of props, you click that button and all those props get rotated in a random angle, which just looks nicer when you have all those little flower props. When it's about the ornaments I'm doing here, so this sort of I don't even know how to call this ornament. When it's about the shape of these ornaments, it doesn't really matter how they look. Basically, if you think they look nice, they are fine. But if you want to do a Baroque garden and you need some inspiration, of course you can look in already existing ones. This design is, as I said, more or less copied from the Baroque Garden in Salzburg in Austria. Because, I like the design and it fit the amount of space we have here on Vedastein pretty well. When it's about the flowers you can use, I really recommend you using those flowers Pidelmo made. There aren't that many other flowers you can use on the workshop, to be honest. Maybe I might, or I should do something in terms of that, just in terms of the for more flowers, because that's not the last Baroque garden I built. So might be I also am going to do some flowers for it. But for now, those are enough. Now we already did two parterres of this Baroque garden, and here is this central piece of the garden around the fountain, or around the water basin. It's not a fountain because I haven't been able to properly model an animated fountain for the game. Maybe I'll actually manage to do that in the future, we'll see. But just basing it off of the wheel garden, that is the inspiration for this one. The central piece of the garden is more richly decorated than the other ones. In that sense, here I'm just placing a statue, and there is this basin. There's this basin in the middle, and that is just because, well, it is the central point of the garden, and later on you'll see another part and focal point of the garden that is sticked to this central point here. And when it's about Baroque gardens, they are not only flowers and bushes cut into geometric shapes, but they also very often work with water ornaments. So many fountains and water jets. Sadly, that is something that is not really possible in Cities Skylines, which is just because it is very annoying to do water jets, especially animated water jets in the game, in a way that they look good. So for now we have just this water basin in the middle that I built after the one in Pillnitz, which is another Baroque garden, actually just a few kilometers away from here, from Dresden, which is also another sort of source of inspiration for this garden. And yeah, I thought the shape of this fountain and the size would fit pretty well in the middle, and what should I say, it actually does fit pretty well, aside from not having a water jet in the middle, of course, which would be appropriate for a Baroque garden like that, but sadly I just haven't been able to model and animate one properly. So as now the flower beds are about done, actually, you see it's not that complicated at all. It's just sort of the first step of thinking it all through, how it might work in the game is the hard part, but once you have the first steps done and know how to do it, it's actually really easy, and that I can tell you, amazingly funny. At least for us Cities Skylines nerds. Here I'm using these, well, those are just sand decals from Avania, and I mainly used those white sand decals because they look good in contrast to the green of the grass and the colorful flowers. And you'll see many Baroque gardens have a very bright sand or very bright gravel in between the ornaments, because, well, as I already said, the spirit of the time was ruling above nature, and so they chose white. Or one reason that they chose this white color is just because of the serenity of it. Now that the main piece of the Baroque garden is done with these bosquets, with these parterres, the flower beds and the grass ornaments, we move into the second part of the Baroque garden, which are the so-called bosquets. Bosquet basically just means, if I remember correctly, I'm not sure what the word-to-word translation is, to be honest. It's just a forest, and more like of a pleasure forest. So it's not a real forest, of course, because it's a Baroque garden and nature has to obey the will of the ruler. It's a pleasure forest that, of course, also is cut into geometric shapes, and you see here even the trees are cut into boxes. And as I just see it, a huge thanks to, as I already said, Cuboid, of course, and SamSamTS for PropLine tool, but also a huge thanks to Ronix for making these boxwood props, the hedges and the box-shaped trees, because the Baroque garden without those things would not have been possible at all. Like, really, it wouldn't have been possible at all. So a huge thanks to Ronix at this point. And the design I'm following here with these hedges, with these grass pieces here, is based on the already mentioned palace or Baroque garden in Pillnitz. I'm gonna put links to both Baroque gardens in the description, so if you are interested you can look those up on Google Maps, and I think you will see the that I more or less copied the design of them. Now here's another design principle of Baroque gardens, and that is the way how I place these trees. You see that the further you go away from the flower beds, the closer the trees are or come toward the main path, and that is because this creates an effect that the path or the alley seems longer than it actually is. And that's another Baroque design principle that, it's just a small, do I dare saying life hack? I just said it. Well, in any case, it sort of is a life hack, that by placing the trees closer to each other, the further away they are from the central point, or from the, yes, I think central point is the main, or is a good word, the closer they are, just to make it look longer. Which is just a small optical illusion here. What I'm doing here is just some small cove to sit in and relax, because Baroque gardens were not only built to intimidate others and show the wealth of the rulers, but also, of course, to take a leisurely stroll through the garden and to chill, so to say, because also those Baroque rulers back in the days wanted some peace and quietness, which they usually didn't have in their palaces because of many people swirling around them and wanting to talk with them or whatever. And so in Baroque gardens, that is also an important point. They wanted to have some peace and some quietness, and that sort of is the point of the bosquets, the pleasure forests. What I'm doing now is basically incorporating the slope that is next to the Baroque garden into the Baroque garden, and I'm just utilizing this slope for the Baroque garden by of course also forcing it into this geometrical shape and having it face toward the central point of the Baroque garden, which again gives another focal point of the Baroque garden. So we have the main axis that goes straight through the whole garden, and then we have this sort of secondary axis here that goes up this hill, which again just creates another sort of point of view. You'll see later on we also plop a building on top of this small slope here, because again it just creates another point of view, and I'm gonna explain a bit more about that later. Here I'm just using some manicured grass props, mainly because they look good. Those aren't a must-have or something you need to have in a Baroque garden, meaning the manicured grass, but it just looks better and more interesting to have this manicured grass here instead of the sort of natural grass. So by now we're already on the other side of the Baroque garden, and here is just the transition from the bosquets, from the pleasure forests onto the other building of this of the Baroque garden, which is, as I already said, or which used to be the royal stables. And now as the main axis is done and the central point of the Baroque garden is done with flower beds, now I'm concentrating on those are the wheel bosquets now. And also, as I already said, here I'm copying the design from the Baroque garden in Pillnitz, where there are small hedge gardens. That's how they are called, hedge gardens. And those are just small compartments surrounded by a hedge, and in those compartments are smaller gardens with maybe exotic flowers, maybe more special flowers, but also normal herb flowers like I don't know, peppermint and chamomile and whatever. So no special flowers, but just a small compartment with something different. And also those small hedge gardens, those small compartments offer another possibility or another piece of quietness and of serenity for, back in the days, the ruler, nowadays the visitors of the garden. we are now about halfway through the whole building process, or not halfway, I think 2/3 of the whole building process. But I think by now you understand why I had to do an episode that long. Because to this point, did you see anything I could have cut out of this episode? I myself didn't find anything I could have cut out. Because as I said, Baroque gardens are something really complex that, to be honest, I also underestimated before doing this. And I sort of was like, yeah, I finished modeling something, because before doing this episode I modeled a building, and I was like, well, I finished modeling it, I should do the next episode of Vedastein. And then it took one day, and then it took another day, and then it took another day, and another day. And this is the 5th day in a row for me working on this episode, and I'm glad now it's done, or almost done. Well, but yeah, so Baroque gardens look amazing, but they are also quite, well, they take quite some time to model. But I think once you have done it, and once it is finished, you have some real eye-catcher in your city. So if you feel like it, definitely try yourself on something like this. It doesn't even need to be a Baroque garden that big, but yeah, I'm sure it's something that would also look very good in your city. And now we're doing the thing that I already mentioned with this, with the second focal point on that slope here. And that is just a small building. I'm later on switching the building to another building I actually made specifically for this spot here. But this sort of building is not only a focal point, but it also is a small pleasure house, maybe. That's a good word. A small pleasure house for the nobility, or for the king, or for whom, for whoever. And it's just to relax, maybe to drink some tea there, or some coffee back in the days. So speaking of the 1700s, or maybe more like 1700s, and yeah, to drink some tea and coffee there with just your closest friends, maybe, or to have some external ruler, some visitor, some diplomat there that you can talk to while sitting there, and so avoiding the vastness and the avoiding the people of the court, basically. That's what it's about. So here, as I already mentioned, I'm switching the building for a building I specifically made for this spot, and of course that is also going to be released on a Steam workshop, don't worry about it. Here I'm just placing some more decorations. That is something I haven't really done in the garden up until now, and to be honest, I'm still not doing it that much, because usually Baroque gardens have a lot of statues, and like really a lot of them, but there aren't enough statues in the workshop, so I couldn't do it. That's about it. Now here is the next big thing of the garden, and the next big thing for this episode. Yeah, we're still not at the end, which is the Orangery. Now, Orangery are also something very interesting, because, as I already said, back in the days, ruler wanted to show how wealthy and how powerful they are, and so they also imported exotic plants. That can be palms, that also can be orange trees. And of course, especially in Northern Europe, you can't just let these plants grow, because it's too cold here. And so rulers built these orangeries, where during summer times these exotic plants can stand outside, so visitors and other people can marvel at them, and oh, you have an orange tree, my god, you must be wealthy. That is sort of the point of it. But in winter time, those plants those plants were put into the Orangery building. So the name Orangery comes from the orange, because back then it was kind of the must-have. It wasn't kind of a standard fruit as today. It was something really special, of course, at least in Northern Europe. And so that's another thing in Baroque Garden, the Orangery. Here in this case, the Orangery is sort of on a different spot than the rest of the Baroque Garden, which happens quite a few times actually. And yeah, it's sort of just a design choice. Also, this Orangery has small flower beds and small hedges and a small water basin. It's basically a Baroque garden, a small Baroque garden in itself again. And the design here is based on the hedge gardens and all that in the Baroque or the Renaissance Palace actually in Villandry in France. Again, there will be a link in the description showing you where this is. And here you see now in planters are now some exotic plants that naturally would never grow in Northern or Middle Europe, and it's just that rulers had the money, wanted to show that they have the money, and so they imported these plants, put them in planters, and during summertime had them outside, and during winter time they were inside this building here. In that sense, we have some palms and some I don't even know what it is, but it looks exotic. What I'm doing here now using PO is the closest I found to orange trees, small orange trees, and yeah, those are like the most common sight in these orangeries. And with that, now we start in the last part of this episode, which are these hedged gardens. I already started and now I'm actually detailing them. And for that I'm choosing different styles. For this small hedge garden here, you see me doing this, as I call it, camellia grove. So basically a small camellia, how is it pronounced? Not sure. This small garden with, again, more or less exotic flowers, and it's just to walk around it, and it's a pretty beautiful place to be. So yes, and that's something I'm more or less, well, that's not really existing, but I copied the idea of doing these small hedge gardens, as I said, from the Baroque Garden in Pillnitz. As I said, link is in the description. I think you'll recognize it when you see it on Google Maps. For this small compartment, I just made an open lawn, so to say. A column in the middle that is sort of the focal point again, in the middle of all these hedge gardens, and then just a lawn. But also here again I'm using manicured grass just to make it look more interesting. For the next one, I'm making this little tulip garden. Again, it's just something, some small compartment in the Baroque garden to have a nice time and walk around and marvel at the flowers. The last part then will be a maze, and yeah, I think you all know what a maze is, and I think, or maybe some of you have already been in mazes in hedges or based on hedges, so that's something you might know. In any case, that is now about the end of this episode, and boy, has it been a long episode, and it actually was surprisingly hard to comment on this whole episode, because yeah, I didn't even know where to start. Maybe you noticed that. In any case, thank you for watching this huge episode. Tell me if you liked it. Do you like the Baroque Garden? Do you maybe would you like to see more of these long episodes in the future, or more Baroque Gardens in the future, or whatever? Thank you for watching. If you liked the video, of course, like it. Feel free to write your comments if you have any more suggestions. If you want to support me further, feel free to support me on Patreon, as many people do. Guys, you are amazing. I love you for that. If you want to get in touch with me or others who follow my channel, feel free to stop by on my Discord server. The link is in the description. And with these cinematics now at the end of this episode, I'll leave you. Have a nice time. Take care of yourselves, and see you in the next video. Bye.